Hi friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today. I'm happy to have you here because I am hopping along with my friends for the Oh So Inspired collaboration hop. This month we are featuring this beautiful card from Danya's Doodles on Instagram. Here you could see the card, and I was inspired by the gray, the florals in the center of the card, and then I'm also going to bring in that green and purple, but I'm going to use yellow instead of blue for my card. So let's jump into the supplies that I have today. I have this great paper pack from This Calls for Confetti. This is the Speckled 6x6 paper pad. I love the earthy spring tones of this pack. I'm also using this brand new cover plate die, the Hello Elongated frame die set. However, I will just be using the oval shape in this die. I also have this beautiful sequin blend called Honeysuckle that matches perfectly with the brand new Honeysuckle stamp set and coordinating die, all from This Calls for Confetti. To follow along with our hop today, you can check out our playlist. It's down below in the description, so that way you can easily just watch everyone who's hopping along today, or you can check out the individual channels that I have linked down below. So I'm starting with some gray cardstock. I trimmed it down with my trimmer to A2 in size, so it's 4¼ by 5½. And as you can see, the cover plate from this die set is also A2, and you can cut out that oval shape. But I'm just going to be using the inside oval die. I love that it creates like a fun border as well, some texture in this die. It makes little embossed lines. I'm also going to grab one of the green sheets from this paper pad, and I'm going to use the oval die to cut out my oval, as I'm going to be creating a shaker card today. I thought about using some of the more yellowy tan colors, but it didn't quite match the honeysuckle yellow in the embellishment pack, so I'm going to make my own speckly background with yellow ink so it matches my sequins a little more. So to do that, I'm going to trim down a piece of mixed media cardstock, and I'm going to trim it to 4 by 5¼ since I know that that will fit my oval die, because I will use it to create the back, or the back panel of my shaker, so the inside of my shaker. So I want to make sure that my cardstock will fit that die. I'm going to bring in Distress Oxides to make my background. So I'm going to start with Squeeze Lemonade, then I'll move into Mustard Seed, and finally Wild Honey, so I can create a nice ombre color background. I'm going to skip through my blending a little bit, as this is a video hop and I don't want to keep you here too long, but leave me any comments if you have any questions along the way that I don't address in my video. Also, I want to apologize for my nasally voice. I'm still working through this stuffy nose that I have. I'm grateful that I can still record and do voiceover, but I do have a hard time breathing, so I will be taking larger breaths as I record. Hopefully that's not too terribly annoying. So once I'm done with the ink blending background, I use some Wild Honey to splatter on some dark spots, and I'm going to use my white non-bleeding ink to splatter on some white. I forgot to add water, so the spots aren't really going to show up right now, but I will add more later because I'll realize that you can't see the white once it dries back. So I will add more white splatter later. I'm using that oval die to cut out my green frame as well as the yellow cardstock. I did my very best to die cut that oval die in the center of that yellow cardstock, and you'll see why in just a moment. I'm grabbing Distress Oxide. I originally grabbed Forest Moss, but I did not like it, so I'm grabbing peeled paint, and I'm trying to cover up that Forest Moss and add in some Distress Oxide just to give it another ombre effect. So it's going to be the lighter cardstock on top, and then I blended in some of that peeled paint. I also grabbed a towel and just kind of wiped up some of the color. It was very inky because I was trying to color the Forest Moss I didn't like. So I think it turned out just fine though. Now I'm going to work on adding my background of my shaker together. So like I said, I did my very best to cut out that oval from the center of that cardstock. So I'm using that as a guide to start gluing these yellow layers down. So I'm grabbing my liquid adhesive and I'm adding glue behind my yellow oval frame, and I'm making sure that the darker yellow is at the bottom of the card, and I'm gluing that down using the outside or the negative die cut piece to make sure it is as centered as possible on the gray and that it's straight. I will take that off and use the grid just to help me make sure it's definitely centered. That's why I like using liquid glue for things like this, because it gives me a little extra time to make sure that it is where I want it before the glue dries. I'll go ahead and glue down the center part of this oval die cut, as that will be the background of my shaker. To create the top of my shaker, I have my green frame, but I need to add some acetate to it. So I'm grabbing the A2 acetate sheets from This Calls for Confetti, and I'm going to grab a Sharpie so I can trace the outside of my oval. I could have done the inside as well, just making sure that I'm using the side that has the protective film on it, because you will peel that off so you don't get any marker on your acetate. But I went around the outside and I did cut it a little larger, or I did draw it a little larger than the oval. So when I cut out the oval, I'm going on the inside of the line and just trimming it down to make sure it will fit behind my green oval frame. Now that my acetate is trimmed down, I added some double-sided adhesive to the back of my frame, and I just used my lift and release tool, the pokey side, to take off the backing of my double-sided adhesive. I'm also using it to get the protective film on my acetate to start it. I just kind of poke at it where I know it won't be seen in case I make an indent on my acetate, and then peel off that protective sheet and glue it or attach it to the glue that's on the back of my frame. I noticed that I didn't get it lined up perfectly, so I just grabbed my scissors and trimmed off anything that was showing. Now I'm going to add more of that splatter. Like I said, I just didn't see the white and I was kind of sad about it, and I thought it would also look nice adding some splatter to the gray. So I'm going to just go ahead and go heavy-handed with the splatter. I added some water this time, which made it much easier to splatter. I let it dry, but unfortunately I didn't let it dry enough. You'll see me smear it in a little bit. But for the most part, I waited for it to dry and cleaned up my desk. To create the well for my shaker, I'm taking my double-sided adhesive foam strips from This Calls for Confetti. It's a wonderful thin foam, but for the purposes of a shaker card, I went ahead and folded these strips on themselves so that way it was twice the dimension or twice the thickness. And I peeled off both sides of the release paper and am working it and going around the oval shape, making sure to butt up against any pieces of foam. So there's no way for these pretty honeysuckle sequins and gems to sneak out of my shaker card. I'm making sure everything is laying pretty flat. I'm going to give it a good little shake just on my desk to make sure all of my pieces are as flat as can be. And then I'm using my It's No Secret anti-static tool to go along the edges of my foam just to make sure I didn't get those pieces lined up perfectly. I, don't have any sequins getting stuck to the edges of my tape. Now I'm closing up the shaker, grabbing that green frame with the acetate and firmly pressing it onto the foam, making sure there is great contact between the two, and giving my card a shake, and everything seems to be going great, except for the fact that I just smeared some of my white splatter with my thumb. This is a top folding A2 card base. I've already have it scored, so I'm just using a scoring tool to help with that fold. And then I decided to use a 1/2-inch corner rounder on all 4 corners of my gray cardstock and my card base. I just thought that it would match the vibes of the oval. I don't know, I just thought since it has an oval centerpiece, having kind of curved corners just looks a little more fun. I'm going to now work on the center focal part of my card. I decided instead of stamping and cutting out my vase for my honeysuckle flower, I'm just going to cut it out of one of my purple sheets from that speckled paper pad. And then I'll go ahead and stamp the honeysuckle plant, the word honeysuckle, and the sentiment sweet as. So my final sentiment will be sweet as honeysuckle, and it will look really cute on top of my vase of flowers. So I have my little mini Misty here. I put my stamps on to fit on this piece of alcohol marker friendly cardstock, and I'm just inking up the Honeysuckle. I mean, I did get some of the other stamps, but no big deal. In this very faint, as you can see, very pale gray ink, and I'm going to do some no line coloring, but not because I want it to be no line coloring, but because I'm going to use a VersaFine Clair on top of my alcohol marker coloring. Since that ink is not alcohol marker friendly, I usually start with a pale ink that is alcohol marker friendly. I colored these flowers in with my Ohuhu art markers, and now I'm using VersaFine Clair in Morning Mist to stamp my sentiments as well as the outline of my honeysuckle. I'm really embracing that gray. If you remember from the inspiration card, her sentiment is stamped or embossed on gray cardstock, so leaning into that gray for my card. I use my die cutting machine to cut out my vase as well as the coordinating dies for my plant and sentiments. I love, love, love when sentiments have their own coordinating dies. And here is my rough layout of how my card is, or how my images and sentiments are going to fit on my card. Of course, I couldn't let my vase go without a little bit of an ombre look as well, so I grabbed Distress Oxide and Seedless Preserves and added some color to that vase as well. Now everything's ready to be glued onto my card. I'm just going to use liquid glue to attach everything. I thought about using some dimension, but there already is plenty of dimension on the card with the shaker. So we're just going to glue everything else down to the card. I'm using my grid mat and I'm adding my vase. I'm going to add in my flowers, but I want to angle them in a way where I don't know if the bottom of my plant is going to sneak out the side of my vase. So I just trim that off since we're not going to see it anyway. I'll add liquid adhesive behind my flowers and get that tucked into my vase. I'll also add my liquid adhesive behind the word honeysuckle, and I added that to the center as well as the sweet as. I kind of thought about off-centering it a bit, but I didn't like it, so I scooched it to the middle. Here's a final look at how my card turned out. I hope you like my take on today's inspiration using new products from This Calls for Confetti. Again, you can find the playlist for today's hop down below in my description and my blog post if you have any other questions about my card. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!